It was a Tuesday morning, and I was doing what I'd done every Tuesday morning for the past 22 years, sitting at the same corner table at Breckenridge's, the little diner on Maple Street in Harlow, Ohio, with a cup of black coffee and a photograph. The photograph was worn at the edges. I had laminated it sometime around year 5 when I realized the oils from my fingers were slowly erasing her face. She was 4 years old in that picture. Pigtails. A gap where her front tooth had just fallen out. She was laughing at something off camera. I never remembered what, and the sun was catching the left side of her face in a way that made her look like she belonged in a painting. Her name was written on the back in my wife's handwriting. Lillian. Age 4. Backyard. June. My wife had been dead for 11 years. I was 63 years old, retired from 31 years with the Harlow County Sheriff's Department, and I had not stopped looking. The waitress, a young woman named Becca who'd been working there since she was 19, always brought my coffee without me asking. She never commented on the photograph. She understood, the way small-town people understand things without needing them explained. I was stirring my second cup when the man sat down across from me. I hadn't invited him. There were 7 empty tables in that diner. He chose mine. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, I guessed. Dark hair going gray at the temples earlier than it should have. He had a jaw that needed a shave and eyes that were doing that thing. That thing I'd seen 1,000 times in interrogation rooms where they look directly at you but are actually watching your hands. He set a manila envelope on the table between us. "You're still looking," he said. It wasn't a question. I kept my hand flat on the table. Old habit. You want to tell me who you are before I decide whether to hear whatever comes next? He glanced at the photograph. Then he looked back at me, and something moved across his face that I hadn't expected to see there. Not calculation. Not the rehearsed smoothness of a con. Something older than that. Something that looked, against all logic, like grief. "My name is Donovan," he said, "and I think you've been looking for me for a long time. My daughter disappeared on the 14th of March 22 years ago. She was 6 years old. We lived in a house on Sycamore Ridge, about 4 miles outside Harlow proper. My wife Carol, and I still can't say her name without a pause in my chest, worked part-time at the elementary school library. I was on the day shift that week. Our neighbor, a retired school teacher named Mrs. Folger, watched Lillian on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, while Carol volunteered at the church food pantry. Mrs. Folger had fallen asleep in her recliner. She was 74. It wasn't her fault. I never blamed her, not for a single day. She carried enough of her own weight without me adding to it. Lily Ann had gone outside to look for a cat she'd spotted the week before, an orange tabby she'd named Creamsicle, even though it didn't belong to us. She was always doing things like that. She had more love in her than she had room for. By the time Mrs. Folger woke up, Lily Ann was gone. By the time I got to the scene, 2 hours had passed. I want to tell you that, being a sheriff's deputy, I handled it with professionalism. I want to tell you I was measured and methodical and kept my head. I did not keep my head. I ran through those woods behind our house, screaming her name until my voice was gone, and 2 of my colleagues had to physically hold me back from the search grid because I was trampling evidence. My captain, a quiet man named Del Hutchins, put both hands on my shoulders and said, "You let us work. You trust us." And I did because I had to, because there was nothing else left to do. We found 1 shoe, a small pink sneaker with a Velcro strap and a drawing of a ladybug she had done herself with a red marker. It was sitting in the mud near the drainage culvert at the edge of our property, about 60 yards from the tree line. We found nothing else. The FBI came in on day 3. A young agent named Torres, patient woman, thorough, ran down every lead. Registered offenders in the county. Custody disputes, though Carol and I had been married 14 years with no complications. Strangers seen in the area. An old pickup truck 2 neighbors had noticed parked on the ridge road for about a week before Lillian vanished. It was never identified. After 18 months, the case went cold. Not closed, cold. There is a difference, though some days it doesn't feel like one. Carol held on for 12 more years. She never stopped believing Lillian was alive. She kept her bedroom exactly as it was. The purple comforter, the shelf of plastic horses, the glow-in-the-dark star stickers on the ceiling that I'd put up one Saturday afternoon when Lillian was 3 and we'd all eaten too much pizza and were lying on the floor laughing at nothing. Carol watered a small succulent on the windowsill for 12 years because Lillian had picked it out at a garden center and named it Gerald. Gerald the succulent outlived my wife. Carol died of pancreatic cancer in the spring. It was fast, the way that particular cruelty tends to be. She was in hospice for 11 days. In her last coherent hours, she held my hand and said, "Find her, Ray. You bring her home." I told her I would. I had been a man of my word for 63 years. This was the one promise I wasn't sure I could keep. Back in the diner, I studied the man across from me. "Donovan," I said, "that a first name or a last name?" "Both, right now." He pushed the manila envelope an inch closer to me. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I know that's not how this works. I'm asking you to look at what's in there." "How do you know who I am?" "Because I've been watching you come here on Tuesdays for 3 months, he said. I needed to make sure. A smarter man might have been unnerved by that. I was a former cop who had spent 2 decades being paranoid. What I felt instead was a very specific kind of stillness, the kind that came when something you'd been waiting for a very long time finally stood up and introduced itself. "Make sure of what?" I asked. "That you were still the right person to tell." I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things. A photograph, recent, taken with a good camera from some distance, showing a woman in her late 20s standing outside what looked like a government building. A birth certificate, Oregon State, for a female child. A name that wasn't Lillian, a date of birth off by 4 months from my daughter's real one. And a photocopy of a small child's drawing. A house, a sun with a face, 2 stick figures, and a dog. In the bottom corner, in the large, careful printing of a child who has just learned to write her own name, Lily. I set it down. I did not look up for a moment. "Where did you get this?" My voice was very quiet. "The drawing." "She had it," Donovan said. "She's had it her whole life. She thought she drew it when she was 5 or 6. She doesn't know where it came from. She doesn't know about any of this." "Who are you to her?" He was quiet for a moment. "Then, I used to be her husband. I made him follow me to my house. I wasn't going to have this conversation in a diner. On the way, I called my son-in-law, my late wife's nephew, a man named Garrett who was the closest thing I had to family left and who had been a social worker for 20 years and had a gift for keeping his face neutral when other people couldn't. I told him to come over and not ask questions on the phone. He arrived 12 minutes after we did. Donovan told his story sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of water he didn't touch. His ex-wife, the woman in the photograph, had grown up in foster care in Portland, Oregon. She'd been placed as an infant, as far as anyone knew, through a private agency that no longer existed. The records, such as they were, showed she had come to the state through an intermediary in the Midwest. Ohio was mentioned in one document. A different document listed her previous placement as having ended due to family instability. There was no biological family listed. There were no medical records older than her first year in Oregon. Her name, the name she had lived her whole life with, was Nadia. She was 28 years old. She started having these, I don't know what you'd call them, not exactly memories, Donovan said. More like impressions. She'd smell something and go completely still, like she was somewhere else. Cut grass. A specific kind of laundry detergent. She'd dream about a dog. A big golden retriever. She said it used to sleep under the back porch steps. I couldn't speak. We had a golden retriever. Her name was Biscuit. She used to sleep under the back steps because it was cooler there in summer. Willie Ann used to bring her water in a plastic bowl and sit out there with her in the evenings. She doesn't know any of this, Donovan said again carefully. She thinks she just had an unstable early childhood. She's never tried to trace her birth family. She said she didn't want to open something she couldn't close back up. He paused. We divorced 2 years ago. It wasn't. There was nothing wrong with her. I want to be clear about that. I left for reasons that were mine. But we stayed close. And last year she found the drawing in a box and she started asking questions. She asked me if I knew anything. And I had heard her mention Ohio once. Just once, years before. I hired someone to look. He reached into his jacket pocket and put a second photograph on the table. Closer this time. Her face. She had Carol's cheekbones. She had my mother's nose. She had the same small scar above her left eyebrow that Lily Ann had gotten at age 4 falling off her bike in the driveway. Garrett, across the table, looked at me. He said nothing. "Have you told her?" I asked. "No," Donovan said. "I wanted to find you first. I wanted to know if you were someone she should know about." He looked around my kitchen, at the photograph of Carol on the refrigerator, at the old crayon drawing still stuck to the cabinet with a magnet after 22 years, at the small succulent on the windowsill. "I think I have my answer." "What do you want from this?" I asked him. Because I was still a former cop. Because I had been deceived before. He looked at me steadily. "Nothing. I want nothing from this. I loved her. I still love her. I want her to know who she is." Garrett put his hand on my arm. I looked out the window at the backyard, at the tree line where the woods began. 22 years of looking at those woods. "How do we do this?" I said. The DNA test was my idea. Donovan didn't argue. Garrett knew a forensic genealogist, a woman in Columbus who worked with the state on cold cases. She had the results back to us in 9 days. Garrett drove out to my house on a Wednesday evening. He sat across from me at the same kitchen table. He had a folder in his hands. He opened it and set it in front of me without saying anything. The probability column read 99.997%. I sat there for a very long time. The kitchen was completely quiet. Outside, a bird was doing something in the oak tree. Some small, persistent sound. I thought about Carol. I thought about the 11 days in hospice. I thought about the promise I had made. "She needs to know before I reach out," I said finally. "She needs to know who she is first, on her own terms." Garrett nodded. "Donovan agrees." "You talked to him?" "He called me. He's a decent man, Ray. I think he's doing this the right way." I thought about that. I thought about a man who had divorced a woman, carried a secret for months, hired someone to find a stranger, walked into a diner to sit across from a former cop he didn't know, and asked for nothing. "He loves her," I said. "I think so." "Maybe he should tell her first, not me." Garrett looked at me. "You sure?" I wasn't sure. I'd imagined this moment, or some version of it, for 22 years. I'd imagined finding her and it being the way things sometimes are in movies, clean and immediate and full of music. But this was not a movie. She was a 28-year-old woman who had lived a whole life without me. She had built herself from the ground up, alone, with none of the things I would have given her. She was not the 6-year-old in the pink sneaker. She was a person I did not yet know. She deserved to be in control of the moment. She deserved to know before she was known. "Yes," I said. "Let him tell her. Let her decide what she wants to do next." It took 3 weeks. Donovan called me on a Thursday afternoon in October. He said he had told her. He said she had sat very quietly for a long time and then asked him to leave and not call her until she called him. She called him 4 days later. She wanted to see the DNA results herself. He sent them. She had her own test done independently. She sent a sample to a different lab, paid for it herself, didn't tell anyone until she had the results back. When she called me, her voice was careful in the way voices are when someone is holding something very large and doesn't want to drop it. "I'm not ready to call you anything yet," she said. I need you to know that I believe the science. And I need you to know I'm not angry. I don't know what I am yet, but I'm not angry." "That's enough," I said. "That is completely enough." Donovan said, "You kept looking." 22 years. She was quiet. Then she said, "My mom, the woman who raised me, she died when I was 19. She was a good woman. I don't want you to think that She took care of you," I said. "I'm grateful to her. I mean that." Another silence. Long, but not uncomfortable. The kind where two people are just trying to breathe in the same space for the first time. "I have a succulent on my windowsill," she said. "I've had it for years. I don't even know why. I've never really been a plant person." Something happened to my voice then. I managed to keep it together, barely. "There's one here too," I said. "It belonged to you." We met in person for the first time on a Saturday in November, at a neutral location, a park in Columbus, halfway between Harlow and Portland, where she had been visiting a college friend. Garrett came with me. Donovan came with her. Neither of them stayed close. I recognized her from 40 feet away before she saw me. She walked like Carol. Shoulders back, chin slightly up, that particular kind of walk that says, I know where I'm going, even when I don't. She was wearing a blue jacket. She had a small scar above her left eyebrow. When she saw me, she stopped walking. We stood there for a moment just taking stock of each other, the way you do when something enormous is happening and your body needs a second to catch up to your understanding of it. She said, "You look like what I expected." I said, "So do you." She didn't hug me. I hadn't expected her to. We sat on a bench and talked for 2 hours. She told me about Portland, about the job she had at a landscape architecture firm, about the dog she'd adopted 2 years ago, a golden retriever mix she'd named Scout, without knowing why she'd felt so pulled toward that breed. I told her about Carol, about the Tuesday morning ritual, the photograph, the diner, about 31 years as a deputy and what it does to a person to be unable to solve the case that matters most to them, about Biscuit sleeping under the back steps, about the stars on the bedroom ceiling that were probably still up there. She kept my room. Her voice was careful again. The whole thing. For 22 years. The plastic horses and the purple comforter and everything. She looked away, toward the tree line at the park. When she looked back, her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. That same quality of held composure that I recognized because I had been doing the same thing all morning. I wish she could have known, she said. She knew in the way she needed to, I said. She never stopped believing you were out there. We sat there quietly for a while. A kid on a bicycle went past. Leaves came down from the oak trees in slow, irregular intervals, the way they do in Ohio in November when the wind can't quite make up its mind. "I'm not going to call you Dad," she said. "Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I need you to know it's not a rejection. It's just, you don't owe me anything," I said. "Not a title, not a relationship, not even this conversation. Whatever you're able to give, I'll take, and I'll be grateful." She looked at me for a long moment, measuring something. "Donovan said you were a decent man," she said. "Donovan's a decent man himself." Something shifted in her face. "Yeah," she said quietly. "He is." We said goodbye at the parking lot edge. She gave me a brief, careful hug, the kind that says this is new and I'm not sure yet, but I'm willing. I held on for exactly as long as she did and not a second longer, to walk back toward where Donovan was waiting by his car. I watched her go. Garrett appeared at my shoulder and said nothing, which was exactly right. That was 8 months ago. We talk on the phone every Sunday. It started as every other Sunday, then became every week somewhere around month 3 without either of us making a formal decision about it. She tells me about her projects, the landscape she is designing, the ongoing negotiations with Scout the Golden Retriever regarding which areas of the apartment are acceptable for sleeping. I tell her about the diner, about Garrett, about the slow rehabilitation of Mrs. Folger's old rose bushes that I've been tending in my backyard because I needed something to do with my hands. Last month, she told me she found a therapist. She said it with the matter-of-fact tone of someone reporting a practical decision, not asking for anything. I told her that was a brave and intelligent thing to do. She said, "I know," in that voice that sounded exactly like Carol, and I had to excuse myself for a moment. I have not been back to Breckenridge's on a Tuesday morning since November. I still have the photograph. I don't carry it with me the way I did before. It lives now in the top drawer of the nightstand, next to a newer photograph, the one Garrett took on the bench in Columbus, the two of us sitting side by side, her blue jacket, my gray coat, both of us looking at the camera with the slightly stunned expressions of people who are not quite sure yet what to do with joy. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if she will ever call me Dad, or come to Harlow, or want to see the bedroom with the purple comforter and the glow-in-the-dark stars. I don't know if the distance will close or whether it will stay at a Sunday phone call with for years, maybe forever. I know that she is alive. I know that she is well. I know her name, and her dog's name, and the sound of her laugh when Scout does something ridiculous, and the exact quality of the silence that means she is thinking rather than finished. Carol asked me to bring her home. I don't think home is a bedroom or a zip code or a name called across a yard. I think home is knowing that someone is in the world, that they are safe, that they are loved, Even from a distance, even incompletely, even in the awkward and tentative and patient way of two strangers who share the same blood and are slowly, carefully learning how to become something to each other. 22 years. She is home. I used to think that looking for someone for 22 years was a measure of love. Now I think it was also a measure of character, not just mine but everyone else's in this story. The way things unfolded didn't happen by accident. It happened because of the kind of people involved, the choices they made when no one was watching and nothing was guaranteed. Donovan didn't have to do what he did. He and Nadia were divorced. He owed her nothing legally, and he owed me even less. A stranger he'd never met. An old man sitting alone in a diner with a worn photograph. But he spent months making sure before he walked through that door. He hired someone. He watched. He waited until he was certain he wasn't going to blow up her life with something careless. That kind of careful, unhurried decency is rarer than people think. It's not flashy. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up and does the right thing quietly. And that's exactly what he did. Nadia had every reason to turn away. She'd built a whole self without any of us. She had a name, a career, a dog, a life that was entirely hers. When Donovan told her the truth, she didn't panic, and she didn't perform. She sat with it. She got her own test done independently, on her own terms, because she was smart enough to know that trust has to be earned and wise enough not to let hope skip ahead of reason. That kind of clear-eyed thinking in the middle of an emotional storm, that's something you either develop or you don't. She had developed it, probably out of necessity, probably the hard way. I respect her for it more than I know how to say. Anne Carroll, my wife, who spent 12 years keeping a bedroom exactly as it was and watering a succulent and never once letting go. She's part of this too. Her persistence wasn't stubbornness. It was a kind of moral clarity. She believed that a person you love is worth the inconvenience of hope. She was right. She just didn't get to see it. I think about what I contributed to this ending, and honestly, it's simple. I kept showing up. Every Tuesday, every year. When the case went cold and the FBI moved on and the neighbors stopped asking, I kept showing up not because I was certain it would work, but because the alternative, stopping, was something I could not live inside of. Endurance isn't glamorous. It doesn't feel heroic from the inside. Most of the time, it just feels like getting out of bed and doing the next small thing. But I believe now that persistence, sustained over enough time, creates its own kind of gravity. It pulls things toward you that might otherwise have passed you by. The three of us, Donovan, Nadia, and me, we each brought something different to this. He brought integrity. She brought intelligence. I brought stubbornness dressed up as faith. None of it would have been enough alone. Together, it was exactly enough. I don't know what Nadia and I will become to each other. I don't need to know yet. What I know is that every good thing in this story came from someone choosing at a specific moment to do the harder right thing instead of the easier wrong one. That's not fate. That's not luck. That's people deciding who they want to be. I'm 63 years old, and I'm still learning that the life you end up with is mostly just the accumulated weight of those decisions made quietly, over time, when nobody's keeping score.